here I am out in my woods, and I thought I would tell you the little story about environmental variability and our inability to measure things or to command certain things to happen during the management process. In 1995, I started as the Massachusetts State Deer Biologist, and I started May 1st. And my first task was to summarize the data from the 1994 hunting season and come up with some recommendations for the management for 1995. And that all had to be done by June. So I did very little different from the previous year. I ran the same equations for coming up with the number of antlerless deer tags and presented that to the board in June, and they voted on it, and it was a very conservative approach. It was very similar to what had been done in 1994. 1995, we had a record deer harvest, and it was very little to do with what I was doing or what I did earlier that year, but it was a good omen. So fast forward to 1996, was my first year of analyzing all the data myself and coming up with some new equations and some new management recommendations for the number of antlerless deer permits. And I was recommending a pretty big increase in the number of permits, particularly in some of the zones in eastern Mass and the southern Berkshires. And I was at the board meeting, it was either May or June of 1996, and one of the board members asked, well, what do you predict will happen for the season? And I predicted, we'll have another record harvest. We'll exceed last year's harvest because we're issuing maybe 15 or 1,000 more antlerless deer permits than we did the previous year. I thought success numerically would go up. Well, we get to the hunting season. The shotgun season was still the biggest component of our deer harvest back then, and our shotgun season always opens the Monday after Thanksgiving. And Monday after Thanksgiving in 1996 was rainy, foggy, just a bleak, drizzly day where if you were in the woods you could see 30 or 40 yards away, and then everything else dissolved into fog. And it was pretty much that way statewide. I was working a check station in western Massachusetts, and the numbers were way down. And our first week, the numbers were really down compared to the year before. And I was hoping that we'd get some snow for the first weekend, because opening day is usually the biggest harvest of deer during the hunting season. It's called an opening day effect. You have the most people in the woods on opening day. And then in our state, usually the first Saturday of the season is also a really big day, because then people who had to work during the week are off of work and can go hunting again. And so I was praying for snow, wishing that we'd have a decent snow cover that would make up for the rain and fog on opening day. Well, I got too much of what I asked for. We had between 1 foot and 1.5 feet of snow from Friday night into Saturday, and I drove out again to a check station in the Berkshires from where I was living in central Mass, and there was almost I drove through some of the rural areas in the state forest areas that usually have a lot of hunting action on a weekend, and there were no cars or trucks in the woods at all. And I was fortunate I had four-wheel drive to get through some of these spots that hadn't been plowed yet. Got to the check station. It was an even slower day than it was on opening day, and it was just too much snow. People couldn't get out. Some of the roads were closed because they weren't plowed. Some of the people who normally would be hunting were out making money plowing snow, and so it was just a further abysmal part of that first week of the 1996 deer hunting season. And we ended up significantly down from 1995, probably 3 or 4, almost 4,000 deer below our 1995 total. So instead of setting a record, we had a tremendous decrease. And it was nothing to do with the number of deer in the woods. It was nothing to do with the equations being wrong. It was simply had to do with the conditions for deer hunters and their ability to access deer. And so we had the 2 days when we would normally get the highest deer kill, we had the worst hunting conditions possible. Fog, cold rain, fog, reduced visibilities on opening day, and then deep snow, reduced hunter access and hunting pressure on the Saturday. And those 2 days really contributed to drive down the deer harvest. the second week of the season, so our season at that point ran for 12 days, Monday through Saturday, and then Monday through Saturday the second week. The second week deer harvest, because we had snow cover on the ground, was up compared to the record year, but nowhere near enough to compensate for the loss of opening day and the first Saturday. So on that slide where I was talking about, you can't control certain things, right? We put in place conditions that we thought would lead to a big deer harvest, but the environment contributed conditions which drove down the harvest in a manner which was completely unrelated to the abundance of deer in the woods. So that's the story I was going to talk about with that slide. There are other stories about adaptive management that we can talk about, and hopefully I'll think up some good examples over the next couple of days and post some more videos for you.